ago, Caleb reached out to me and told me that he had a project about Bitcoin which would interest my listeners and viewers. So I had invited him today to tell us about his new project and how it's going to help someone who's just getting into Bitcoin. So first, let's get to know a bit about you and how you got into Bitcoin.
So my name is Caleb, and I got into Bitcoin in probably now I can't remember. So it was 2019, fall of 2019. I was listening to a libertarian podcast, and Guy Swan came on. Have you listened to Bitcoin Audible?
Yeah,
Yeah. So Guy Swan came on, and at that point, the podcast was called The Crypto Economy, and he he was talking about what Bitcoin was, and I could hear a passion in his voice, and so I just subscribed to his podcast and started listening to it. And as I'm listening to these episodes, most of the stuff is going completely over my head. I was like, I don't know half of what he's saying, but I can tell this guy's very passionate. And that was what sucked me in, is there's something here, because I've heard of Bitcoin before. I know that it was at $20,000 at one point, and I felt like I missed the boat. But then there's this guy who's still very much on board with it. It's like there's definitely something here. So that was really what started me into Bitcoin. So I keep absorbing this content, and I finally got to a place where it's like, you know what, I'm going to put some money into it, and I'm going to assume that this is a big risk. Okay, so I'm going to put some money that I'm going to I'm willing to lose it, right? And I kind of had that attitude for maybe the next year or so, maybe even the year and a half. And it wasn't until my son was born that that perspective really changed. I knew most of what I did going into it, but then that moment when my son was born, I sort of had a change of perspective. You know, he comes into this world, and I'm holding like this little breath of life, and it's just so much love and just pure energy. It was just an incredibly life-changing thing, and my perspective on what life was all about suddenly just totally changed, because all I wanted to do with my time was spend it with this little boy and my wife, and just be with these people all the time. And it made me realize that throughout my life, my time has only gotten more and more valuable, because as I spend it, I have less. And the more that I realize that I want to spend time with my family, I want to spend time doing things that I want to do. And so my time is actually appreciating. and and as I, obviously understand what Bitcoin is at this point in time, I realized that the money which I use to represent the time that I have spent to turn into value is actually depreciating. And money really is time. The saying, at least here in the United States, is commonly said, is time is money. But actually, money is time. It's basically universal exchange of valuable time. And without human time, money just cannot exist. So I realized that it's almost an insult to have my time being represented by money, which is losing value, but my time is the absolute opposite, right? So I'm basically fighting this uphill battle. I'm on a treadmill getting nowhere. And that was when I realized, man, I've got a responsibility to tell as many people about this as I possibly can. I was trying to tell people from an investment perspective, but this is something so much greater than that. So that was sort of how I got into like really passionately into Bitcoin, and that's kind of why I started the website. So
And at some point, you talked about how money is time, and how would the world look like if without time and money? Like, how could the world look like differently?
right, so this is such a cool question and speculation, you know. So the only thing that we can assume as far as right now, what a solid, like a decent money standard would bring to the world, are are the problems that it would fix. So, um, for instance, some of the major issues that we have with our monetary system today, we're seeing it on extremely great levels today with the coronavirus and the quantitative easing, all of that kind of stuff. So what's happening is the government has decided that they are the end all be all. They know the best way to bail our systems out of economic crises, which have been created by a money that is manipulatable and corrupted by a very few people at the top. And what's happening is all of these people have decided to spend money that doesn't exist, right? And so they are really borrowing against all of the people who create the value. They're borrowing against that future. They're borrowing against value that has not been created. And what we're talking about as far as a Bitcoin future is taking a lot of that power away from these people. And we're talking about moving away from large governments who issue overbearing executive directives that force their people to do things that the majority of them don't want to do. They are taking individual power and responsibility away from individuals. And the one tool, the one common thread that they use to do all of this stuff is the money. That's the thing that gives them power. And so really the idea as far as the political economic future of a Bitcoin standard is one in which the governments are much less powerful. They have much less say over an individual's life. They're much smaller, so governing bodies are more representative of smaller groups of people, and it allows people to freely exchange and really operate in a totally free and fair market. Now we've seen this at the very beginning of the United States of America, and of course we've seen it in economies all over the world throughout history. But the example that I always like to use, because it's close to me, is if you just look at the history of the United States, we're founded in the late 1700s, and by the year 1920, we are a major world power fighting in a major world war. So in just a couple hundred years, we're talking about a country that gained so much economic power, but it was simply because people were allowed to do what they wanted to do. They were allowed to take care of themselves and take care of their families. And that was because the money wasn't corrupt. The economy wasn't corrupted, but thought that they control it and make it better for everybody. That's really what we're for sure looking at going back to is a more free and fair economy. Now, the really exciting part about Bitcoin is that the new about it, especially being that you can send this money not just to people in your locale, but you can send it to people across the world instantaneously. Um, this is a world economy that was not accessible before, and we don't really know what the implications of that are. And that's, I think, what blows a lot of people's minds when they really get into Bitcoin.
And that is why you have started this project called
Mm-hmm.
Hold Bitcoin. Can you tell
Yes.
us how you got this idea?
Yeah. So, okay. So holdbitcoin.org. It is it's a website dedicated to, well, it's really to empower individuals and families to challenge the existing legacy financial system. So the idea is that for passionate Bitcoiners, this is going to be a place for you to send people that have maybe a very, very slight interest in Bitcoin. And we are trying to gear educational material to people with specific perspectives. And so, let's say, for instance, I'm a carpenter, which I didn't actually get into in my introduction. I should talk about that. I'm a carpenter. And if I was talking to another carpenter and I said, hey, you should look into Bitcoin, I don't really have a great place to send them or a great perspective that I can lend them that um, is super like quick and easy, right? So the idea with Hold Bitcoin is we have a quick way. We're building very quick and easy ways to onboard people with those specific perspectives. So imagine, if you work at a restaurant, or you have a friend who's a waiter or a waitress, and you say, okay, I've got this video for waiters and waitresses that explains what money is in context that you can understand. Teachers, anybody, policemen, anybody that has a just is going to view the world in a different lens because of who they are and what they do. So what I'm trying to do and have been working on for a while is, so ever since Daniel Prince's podcast, is people have come to me and said, hey, I want to help, how can I help? And I've realized that all of these people, they're very strong Bitcoiners, are very passionate about Bitcoin, and they lend these individual perspectives. And so what we're trying to do is get those people to sort of distill down their idea of what Bitcoin is in a way that the people around them can understand. So it's one place that those people can take their intrigue and they can sort of get tripped down the rabbit hole, because then once they get that 5-minute introduction, then we're talking about, okay, now we can get into some long form content. We're going to stay sort of in the specific perspective driven education. But then after that, let's get you down in the really big rabbit hole stuff. So let's get you into, now you can start exploring. So we're developing a mind map. Do you know what a mind map is? Have you ever seen one? Yeah. So it's just a visual way of seeing how different ideas and thoughts are connected. So we're going to take all kinds of the free educational content, and we're going to try to put it all in one place that's super easy to understand. And this is really what the really big project is here, because there is so much content, and obviously some content speaks more to others than it does to some. So I'm trying to get help in curating that. So I'm kind of making some templates and some processes to get some people to help with that educational material. In addition, and this is especially where I think your listeners would be able to help out as well, the passionate teen Bitcoiners, we're going to be launching a store. It's just, I haven't figured out the URL, but it's probably going to be holdbitcoin.org/shop or store. It'll be on the website. And the idea is that you go there, you buy a sweatshirt, you buy a t-shirt, there's cool stuff on there like socks if you want, backpacks, whatever. The idea is to get the Hold Bitcoin symbol in as front of as many eyes as we can, because what the Hold Bitcoin symbol represents is you are outwardly saying to the world, I value Bitcoin as my base store of value. You're saying to the world, I'm ready to leave this legacy financial system, and I'm ready to empower myself and empower others. And the idea is to get this everywhere so that people will keep coming to the site, and people will keep learning, and then again doing the same thing. I'm envisioning in places where Bitcoin is being banned, like in India, people flying Hold Bitcoin flags. This is going to be a symbol that says, you know what, we're standing up against the oppressiveness of a corrupt system, and we have decided we're moving on, and we are going to hold value, or we're going to hold our value in something better than what you guys are giving us. For now, at least, I would love for this to be my full-time job. I want this to eventually be my full-time job, but for now, all of the proceeds from the store are going to go right back into holdbitcoin.org. So the plan is to hire some branding experts to really get the name out there for more advertising, just to get this thing rolling. And eventually, I'm hoping to even be able to pay content creators and make this a self-sustaining message, and really a monster for the world to see. So.
And what would be your ideal outcome that you'd like to achieve
That
with
is
this?
Yeah, I love that. Because I should. That is my why. The ideal outcome is hyper Bitcoinization. So the ideal outcome is to reach the future that we were talking about before, a future that is uncorrupted by a few at the very top. I don't know how that future is reached. Don't get me wrong, that seems like a very complicated process, but and honestly painful. But the more people that we have on board, the more people that have decided to hold Bitcoin, and I haven't explained that. Holding Bitcoin essentially just means obviously to value it as your base store of value, but to own it and personally possess it. So to hold it in ideally a hardware wallet, or some kind of any kind of cold storage, and not sell it really at any cost until we've reached that point of hyper Bitcoinization. So um, really, yeah. So really, the ultimate goal is to see that better world, because I realized through my studies of Bitcoin is that, and this is something that Elon Musk is famous for saying on Twitter, is in the end it was inevitable. And the truth is our our species, no matter what happens, ultimately we choose the best thing. So throughout time, it's taken us thousands of years, but we chose gold as our base store of value. It took many iterations and many challenges, but the best societies like ancient Rome, um, I don't know about ancient Greece, but ancient Rome is a great one. Some of these really thriving societies, they were the ones to first go onto a gold standard because it had the five monetary principles. So we've got scarcity. And this is the obvious one. This is the one that sucked me in, meaning that it's hard to find. It's rare. That was one of the first monetary principles that was attractive about gold, because it was hard to find. We have durability, um, and in fact, I should speak to scarcity as far as it relates to Bitcoin. So scarcity, as far as it relates to Bitcoin, is the best money that we've seen, because it is actually the first thing in the universe that is 100% true and knowable scarcity. We know that around sometime in the year 2140, the last Bitcoin will have been mined, and we will have a total of 21 million Bitcoin in circulation, and that's it. No more Bitcoin are being created. So, and there's really nothing in the universe that, yes, there are things that are scarce. You can argue that land is scarce, for instance, but it's not 100% knowable. And it's also technically not scarce in the way that we could inhabit other planets, or maybe we could figure out how to inhabit Antarctica or live under the ocean. What I'm saying is that you still don't necessarily know how much land is usable and can be harnessed for human use. It's not true, 100% true and knowable scarcity. The second principle is durability, and this was one that gold was fantastic at. Is gold, you can't really destroy it. You can meld it and mold it, manipulate it, but in the end, gold is still gold. You can melt stuff into it, I guess, but over time, if you have a pure gold coin, it stays gold, and it doesn't tarnish. It works really well that way. As far as Bitcoin goes, the durability is obvious. I mean, the idea behind Bitcoin is that it's digital. So if if gold holds its value because it's durable, um, Bitcoin is even better in that it's not physical, so you can't clip an edge off of it and do it for a million coins and create one whole coin off of it, which is what they did in ancient Rome. Then you do have divisibility. Um, this is one that actually led to fiat currency. Is well, the next two principles, I should say, is divisibility and portability. So essentially, rather, people wanted to be able to more easily divide and carry around their gold. But you have a gold coin, let's say it represents, I'm just going to say $10. Well, I want to buy something that's worth $7. So what do I got to do in order to do that? I guess I have to clip off 30% of this coin, 30% of the weight in gold, then keep the rest from, give you 70%, and then keep the 30% for myself. So the gold is actually doesn't work super well in the divisibility category, especially when we're talking about um, deflationary principles. It just doesn't work super well for that. And it's the same with portability. If you have a lot of gold, if you have a lot of wealth, you can't really carry around a massive stack of gold with you, especially if you want to travel the world. That's part of the reason banks were invented, is because they hung on to your gold, and then they would give you promises that if you came back to the bank with a specific note, that you could get that gold redeemed. um, and then of course the last principle of money, and for divisibility and portability, Bitcoin wins in this particular instant because first, you can send Bitcoin across the world instantaneously, and with the Lightning Network, I should probably say, you can send it across the world instantaneously, um, and it's also basically infinitesimally divisible. If you want to keep dividing, so let's say I want to send somebody some like a quarter of a Satoshi. That is possible, or at least it will be in the future when people want to do that. It's really not necessary now because the Satoshis don't have that much value, but eventually, when people want to, and the money is worth so much, people are just going to say, sure, I'll take half a Satoshi, or I'll take a quarter of a Satoshi for whatever I'm selling, and that's definitely doable. And the last principle is recognizability. So the thing that gold had going before it is pure gold. You could verify that it was gold by weighing it. So it has a certain density, and when you had a gold coin, if you put it up on a scale against some other thing that was supposed to have the same weight, you could verify that because of its chemical principles. Yeah, you can verify because of its chemistry that and density that it was gold simply by weighing it. And now the Bitcoin blockchain actually does that better as well, because it is 100% open source, and the ledger is 100% um, viewable public for anybody to see. And you can run your own node, and you can verify that the Bitcoin that you have is running on this software that everybody else is using. It is running on the true Bitcoin blockchain. So it hits all of these five monetary principles that gold hit, which is the currency that our civilization, that our society had picked, um, but sort of missed the mark on a couple of principles because of its physical principles. And now Bitcoin has become the digital version of that, and has become a better version of those principles. So
You also mentioned being a convicted Bitcoiner. What does this
mhm.
mean to you?
Yeah. So being a convicted Bitcoiner means that I have had the realization and the truth that the only reason that money has value is because I value it, because you and I value it. So if we were to make an exchange, let's say, um, I was to buy a couch from you or something on Facebook, I'm not going to come to you and say, okay, I'm going to trade you my couch for a pair of headphones, because chances are you don't want a pair of headphones. Okay, well, what is it that you do want? Well, I don't want a pair of headphones, but I would really like to have a Nintendo Switch. It's like, okay, so I got to find somebody who I can trade my pair of headphones with that has a Nintendo Switch. Then I got to get in and get a Nintendo Switch. And then I got to trade my Nintendo, you know what I mean? You got to trade the Nintendo Switch for the couch that I have. And the thing that money solves is it is the universal medium of exchange that we have all collectively decided that, okay, this, instead of trading things that we don't all necessarily want in specific exchanges, money is the universal representation of all things. And the only reason that it has power, despite popular belief, um, is because we value it. And so to be a convicted Bitcoiner is to say, I am choosing to challenge this system, to challenge the status quo, and I'm going to move into a better future by valuing a money that is better, a money that hasn't been corrupted, and a money that is fair and equitable for everybody in the world, not just those at the top.
In my last episode with Robert Breedlove, we
Yeah.
talked about the Renaissance 2.0,
Yeah.
and in his opinion, it has already begun.
Mm.
Would you agree with this?
Yeah. So when I think Renaissance 2.0, I sort of think of it as a worldwide enlightenment, if you will. And I would 100% say that's the case. And the reason that I say that is because if you look if you just look at one specific thing, the philosophy of that our world has been expanding upon and falling into with the long form content. I don't know if you've ever watched or you know who Jordan Peterson is, but
Uh,
so he's like a modern day philosopher, and people follow him because he's so wise, really. He just seems like he knows, he's just got such a great perspective on so many things, and it makes us think about the world in a different way. And that's what Bitcoin is doing for a lot of people. So Robert Breedlove is a fantastic example of this. Is archetype the right word of a philosopher, a modern day philosopher? And he will say that Bitcoin is the thing that sort of opened his mind to that fact and made him see the world in such a totally different way. And so that's what I'm seeing with Bitcoin in particular. Is it's opening people's minds to this entirely new concept. Something that we have been trained into and kind of almost been trained to be on this hamster wheel of thought. We're breaking free of that now, and we're exploring so many new concepts and ideas. Another great one would be like John Vallis. If you've ever listened to Bitcoin Rapid Fire, he's very philosophical, and how something can, something that is simply just a representation of value can inspire somebody to think about the world in a spiritual way and think about how humanity works in a light that is different than physical is so amazing. And that's what's amazing about all of this. And I do agree. I think that something is changing amongst our species, and we're moving into something so different than we had before. Now that we've discovered the solid money, but also now that we've got this interconnectedness. I mean, you and I are across the world from each other. And I talked to somebody in Australia yesterday for like 2 hours, and the common thread that we had was our passion for Bitcoin. We want to see a world run on Bitcoin. We want to see a world that's fair for all of us, and we want to see this new economy and see that what we can accomplish. Yeah, so it's such a cool thing, and I'm excited. It's such an exciting time to be alive. That's for sure.
so those were all the questions I had prepared for today. So why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and your project?
Yeah. So if you want to find me on Twitter, I also have my direct messages open. You can find me at HLDBTC. And like I said, right now I'm looking for really any and all kinds of help to really get my message out there. And if you have, especially for your listeners, I would love a Teen Bitcoiner perspective to help develop some introductory perspective videos, and some introductory specific Teen Bitcoin perspective stuff that we can put on the site. And the site itself is holdbitcoin.org. And also, again, the easiest way to support what we're doing is to just buy some merchandise from the store. Buy a shirt, buy a sweatshirt. We've got some really cool stuff on there, and I think your listeners will really like the logo too. It's pretty cool. It's a little badger hanging onto a Bitcoin, and it just represents this is my ultimate store of value. This is the future I'm seeing, and I'm not letting go of it. So
That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on
Yeah, of course.
and spreading the message to your listeners. I'm excited uh, for what you're doing, and it's so important for young people to get educated as to not just what Bitcoin is, but what money is. Because when we all fall down the rabbit hole, uh, the 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 sooner it changes and shatters our perspectives on so many things. And I know, like when I was growing up, the education system, as far as personal finance and what money is, it sort of failed me. And you are doing something that is such a big deal, because these educational systems have only gotten worse in terms of teaching people about world economics and what money could be, what money has been, when it's worked the best, and how it could be better. I mean, you just don't see that. And so to be changing that so early on in life, to be shattering that perspective and challenging that perspective so early on in life is huge. So thank you for doing what you do.
No problem. I'm happy to have you here.